Okay, guys. So thanks for joining us this morning. I did want to spend a little bit of time, given that we're now about a month away from a whole bunch of people starting their shows with Halloween, etc., going through the scheduler. Scheduler this year is going to be a little bit scary, and I would encourage all of you to get your schedule set up early and maybe start test running them on the computer. While I obviously tested it extensively when I wrote it back in January and February, and a couple of guys, and particularly Joel Deering's done a lot of testing on it during the year and found a bunch of problems, which I've been fixing as we go along. The reality is this is 1.0 software. It's never been used in anger in a show. And, we should be a little bit worried about that. The one thing I will commit to is getting fixes out quickly, even if it involves me getting fixes out outside the normal release cycle. I'll push pretty hard to get that done. So, yeah, strongly suggest you test it early, make sure you're comfortable with it, run it for 24 hours or so, make sure that it kicks in exactly as you expect. And if you have issues, post them up onto Facebook and the usual places, and I'll check them out. So today I really only plan to present the basics. There's a lot in xSchedule. When I wrote the scheduler, there were really two purposes. One was I desperately wanted to get the scheduler out of xLights. It cluttered the screen up. It was not commonly used. It dominated the screen. There was actually 2 tabs alone for the scheduler. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me. And it also meant that you had to run all of xLights when you were running your show, and that didn't make a great deal of sense. The other thing I recognised was that the FPP guys were somewhat dominating the show. They had a whole bunch of features and functions, etc., which our old scheduler just didn't come close to. And so with the help of Billy Frostick, we've thrown in a web server, and we are able to let you control the scheduler from your phone and things like that. And along the way, to be honest, we decided that we'd try and extend the capabilities of FPP as well. Now, it's not a perfect match. There are some things that you can still do in FPP that you can't do in the scheduler, but there's also a bunch of stuff that you can do in the scheduler that you can't yet do in FPP, although I know for a fact that Captain Murdoch is sort of, he's more than aware of what we're doing, as just as we're more aware of what he's doing. In fact, I've spoken to him on a couple of occasions about some ideas, and we're continuing to try and sync some things up as well to try and make both xLights and FPP and the scheduler all work better for you over time. So let's start with the basics. And of course, the most basic thing that you'll want to do is create a playlist. And when you first fire up the scheduler, you get a list of the playlists. Ignore my one called voting. I'm working on something with Ben Shaver, which is looking at allowing you to do something like the ability to have a website to let people vote for the next song, and that's getting close as well. We'll see how we go. So to add a playlist, you click on the add button. Now, before we go there, within the options, there is this thing called advanced mode up here. By default, when you install xSchedule, it's not in advanced mode. If you put it into advanced mode, it gets a little bit more complicated. We turn that off by default, so that by default you get a very simple interface in the scheduler. And to add a playlist, you just click the add button, and you can name your playlist. So let's go and build my Christmas show. These 2 checkboxes here just let you say, oh, look, I've got an introductory song, which is my first step, or my last song, which is only to be played once. And that means the looping will exclude the first and the last song and just play the middle ones. And then only when the schedule's due to finish will the last step kick in. So that's there, and then you get to basically add a whole bunch of sequences. Now, by default, there's really only 3 available. You can add an FSCQ file, so that's either an animation sequence or an audio sequence that you've created in xLights. You can add a sequence with an additional video, so if you're going to hook a projector or something up to the video output on your computer because you want to show a video, you would do that one. Or you can just add audio only. So if, you know, in the hour before your show, you just want to play Christmas music in the background or something, but not actually drive the lights, you can add audio only. So you have multiple options there. To add them in, there's a couple of ways to do it. One thing that you can do is you can go into Explorer, go to your show directory. You can sort it by type. You can find all of your FSCQ files, highlight them in Explorer, like so, and you can drag across and drop them. So you can do that if that's what you'd like to do. Or you can click down here on Add FSCQ, in which case, again, you go into your show folder and you can come in and select your songs. I don't know. I'll just select those. I'm control clicking to select different ones in that list, and I click open and it will just add them to the list. The number alongside each is the duration of the song. So you can see how long each of those songs is, and up the top tells you that this overall sequence is just under 1,000 seconds long overall. So it's very, very easy to add things into the list. If you want to reorder them, as you almost certainly would, these tree sequences in particular need to be played in order, you can just drag and drop them around. There's some quirks to the dragging and dropping, but you can do that. I would typically, to be honest, what do we got here? I would typically interleave my talking trees between the songs. I've got to fix this drag and drop. It does things in the opposite order to what I would expect. All right, so reordering your sequence, getting all the songs in order is really as simple as that. For each of the songs, you've then on the right-hand side got a bunch of properties that you control. Obviously up here is the FSCQ file. So this is the FSCQ file that you created in xLights when you rendered and you saved. That's the data that the sequencer is actually playing. The sequencer does not look at the XML file that is your sequence. It expects all of the data to have been pre-rendered. So if you go and change the sequence in xLights and you want the sequencer the scheduler to pick it up, the only way to do that is to re-render it and save it so that FSCQ file gets updated. In simple mode, you can ignore the blend mode. It should be overwrite. That's fine. You can ignore the limit channels, etc. You can ignore the override audio unless for some reason the audio file is in a different location than what the FSCQ file thinks it's in. So this is the location of the audio that was saved inside the FSCQ file. If it's not actually there, you've put it in a different location for some reason, you can click the override audio button and you can go and find the audio file on your computer, and that will find it. There's also this thing called Fast Start Audio. Use this thing sparingly, but if you click this checkbox, what the scheduler will do is, normally what would happen is when it came time to play the song, what we do is we go out to the audio file, we read the audio file into memory, we convert it to constant bit rate, ready to play it. For those that have been using xLights for a while, you'll remember a few years back that in xLights, there was all this talk about, oh, you've got to use constant bitrate music and all of this sort of stuff. And that stuff all went away almost 2 years ago. And the reason it went away was because we started to do all of that work on the fly for you when you load the sequence up. Now, the problem with that is that it actually takes a bit of time to load the audio file and convert it to constant bit rate. It's not a lot of time. It's, you know, for an average song, it's about half a second, but that half a second can be noticeable when you're playing your show, and some people don't want to have that every time it switches song. And so if you click Fast Start Audio, what xSchedule will do is it will actually go through your entire sequence, and for every song that's got this fast start audio check, it will actually preload and pre-convert that audio and sit it up into memory. I wouldn't be doing that with the 32-bit version, but with the 64-bit version, generally speaking, it should be able to do it. The override volume, if you click on this checkbox, then you can actually change for that song only the audio volume for that song. Which you may want to do if it's a particularly loud song and you want to adjust that volume to get some consistency. Saves you going through and normalizing the volume across all of your audio tracks. You can ignore priority, and I wouldn't play with delay either when you're in this simple mode. These functions become much more useful when you get to some of the more complicated things that you can do with the scheduler. And that's really all there is to it. Let's, however, add an FSCQ and a video. Now, I don't actually do this normally, so what I'll do is I'll add an FSCQ file, and now I get this extra line item here, which is adding a video file. So let's go into my videos directory. I think I have an OLAF video here. And then you get this other button, which is this position window. And this window here, you would drag, you would resize this. You'd probably put this actually on your external monitor and fill the screen up, because this is where the video is going to be played. And this window shows you just how large the video is going to be. And so when you're happy with that, you click OK, and it will remember that. The topmost window just forces that window to always sit at the very front, which is probably what you're going to want it to do, so that if there's any other windows that happen to be on that screen, you want to make sure that the video overlays it. Now, that window is going to pop up when it gets to this song only. So if you're going to do video and you're going to have your monitor on, you're probably actually going to want to go and create a video for all of these in order to make sure that there's a black screen and your monitor's off, if that was the case. Adding audio only is really as simple as grabbing some songs here. I don't know. And here you just get a reduced set of properties, such as the ability to override the volume and the fast start, etc. And that's it. And that's really it. You can reorder them and everything else when you're happy with it. If you want to delete something, you can obviously delete them here as well, and you can use drag and drop to reorder them. And when you're happy with it, you click OK. When the save icon here comes up, don't forget to click save to make sure that it's all good. So we have a nice long sequence here. Now, one of the things you may be wondering is, well, but how does the scheduler know how to send all of this data out? How does it know what all my controllers are and everything else? And the answer to that is that in this show folder, which is shown down here at the bottom of the screen, is obviously my networks file that you can see in xLights. So there's a splash screen on Windows. It does work. All right. So what it's looking at is it's actually looking at this network setup in xLights. So there is no way to configure your network setup. Okay. Looks a bit weird, but there's no way to set this up in the scheduler. You've got to go into xLights to set up all of your controllers, and then obviously I'm then going to use this data here to send the data out to the controllers. So you need to make sure it's set up. It'll also respect things like if you inactivate any of these in here. So if you know that you can come in here and deactivate a controller. When you deactivate it, the scheduler will also consider that deactivated. All of the protocols that you support here are all supported by the scheduler as well. So it will quite happily play all of those things. All right. So the next thing, having created our playlist, is we are going to want to schedule it to start. And you're able to schedule a playlist in multiple ways. Now, the easiest way to do it is to click on the playlist and come down here and click the schedule button, and it brings up the schedule window. Now you can schedule it multiple times. So if you've got a slightly different schedule that you want to run on a Friday and Saturday night, then you would create two schedules, one for Sunday to Thursday and one for Friday and Saturday. So let's do that. So we're going to enable this schedule. I'm going to call this my weeknight schedule. If only I could type. We're going to start this on the 1st of December. That's the proper way to write dates. We're going to finish that on the 30th. Oh, no, it's in, oh, bloody hell, it's in US order. All right. And we're going to finish that. So that's actually the 12th of January. That's not going to work well, is it? All right. So we're going to finish that. So we're going to just run this for the month of December. So you'd probably want to make that 2017. So just for the December, although you can click the every year, in which case it just ignores the year and it will always run in December. This is my weeknight one, so I'm going to take out Friday and Saturday because I consider those to be my weekend nights. There's no school day the next morning, so it can run late. I can get set my on time. Now it defaults to 7 p.m. That's typical show time start when I do my testing here. And you can set your off time down here. Now, if your off time, let's say I wanted that to actually be 1 a.m., the scheduler will quite happily do that, and it knows that this 1 a.m. is actually 1 a.m. the day after it starts. And so it will quite happily go across midnight without you having to do funky things like stop your schedule at a minute to midnight and restart it at midnight and things like that. You almost certainly want to loop your schedule. That makes sure that otherwise what will happen is it'll get to 7 p.m, it will play the schedule through once and then it will stop. And so although you said you want to turn it off at 1 o'clock, you didn't tell it to loop and it ran out, so it stopped. And you could also set a number of max loops, but in this case, I just want it to loop and fill up the time. If you want it to shuffle the songs, so randomly choose a song during that time, you can click the shuffle button. The shuffle only works, I think, if you have at least 4 songs. If you've got less than 4 songs, it will largely ignore the shuffle and just play it in a loop, just because randomness doesn't make a sense if you've got such a small number of songs. And the only thing it guarantees is it won't play the same song twice in a row. It doesn't guarantee that it will randomly play every song at least once before it doubles up. It doesn't guarantee that. And then you have a priority. Now, the way the priorities rank go from 1 to 10, I think it is. And the priority is used to resolve the situation when you've got multiple schedules that conflict with one another. So for the moment, I'm just going to leave it at 5 because I've only got the 1, so it doesn't really matter. So that's my weeknight schedule. Let's go and schedule it again. Let's go and create our weekend schedule. So again, we're going to start that on the 12th of January. We're going to finish that on the 31st in 2017. We will do it every year. This one, as we said, is our Friday and Saturday schedule. I don't know, normally you'd finish this later. So I don't know, we'll finish this at 3 a.m. We're crazy. And again, this one doesn't conflict. This one is entirely separate from my weeknight schedule. It plays on an entirely different night of a week. So that one's okay. But let's imagine that this is actually 11 p.m. and we'll go back to our weeknight one. And on a school night, we turn it off at 10 p.m. because all good families should be in bed at 10 p.m. on a weeknight. We'll save it. So those two schedules will play the same show, slightly different times on different nights of the week. Now, here, Christmas Eve is obviously a big night, and we want to schedule it slightly different on Christmas Eve. So let's create a Christmas Eve schedule. So here, last time I checked, Christmas Eve was the night of the 24th. And it's for one night only, fortunately every year. In this case, we're going to leave it on every day of the week because obviously Christmas Eve is going to vary. It's going to be a different day of the week every year. But all those folks that go to church at midnight Christmas Eve, all those good Catholics, come past my show up until about 2 a.m. So I'm going to run my show quite a bit later on Christmas Eve for all of those people. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump up the priority. I'm going to make it a 6.
What if you do the end time on the date, the end year?
Oh, yes. Doesn't really matter because I said every year. So to be honest, it's going to play every year either way. And I'm going to bump the priority up. And what the priority means is that when it gets to the 24th of December, this schedule's the one that's going to take priority. So this is the one that will start rather than my regular weeknight or weekend schedule, depending on when it happens to be. So that priority, by increasing the priority, the highest priority schedule will be always the one that kicks in. Now, if I'd set that Christmas Eve one to start at 8 p.m., what would have happened is the weeknight one, I think the 24th a weeknight, that would have kicked in at 7 p.m. and then at 8 p.m. the Christmas Eve one would have kicked in and taken over from the weeknight one. So the weeknight one would have been suspended and the Christmas Eve one would have kicked in and started to play because it had a higher priority, and so therefore it becomes the schedule that plays. So that's pretty much how I would set up my Christmas schedules. Down here, you can see it's telling me the next time that schedule is going to be active. So the weekend, obviously the 1st of December is a weekend night, i.e. a Friday or a Saturday. And so it's going to kick off on the 1st, and the first weeknight happens to be the 3rd of December, and it's going to kick in at that time. So it really is as simple as that to set up a schedule. Now you can have multiple playlists. You can go back down here, add another playlist, add another schedule, etc. Again, you would use the priorities of the schedule to decide which one played. Again, the highest priority. If two schedules have the same priority and they clash with one another, the scheduler will make a decision about the first one it comes across that it will decide will play. I don't know if it's any more deterministic than that. So I would use the priorities to separate them.
Could you give an example of a 24-hour sequence to run on your off times?
Sure. So if you wanted a background, let's just call it Christmas music. I'm going to add a bunch of audio. I don't know. All right, so there's a bunch of audio in a Christmas music sequence. And if you wanted, and I'm pretty sure I did this, so if you want to schedule this, so this is all the time. So again, I might do it from the 1st of December to the 31st of December. It's going to be every year, so it doesn't matter. I want it to run every day. I want it to kick off at midnight. And I'm pretty sure that will run at 24 hours. If these two are the same, then basically it ignores the time attribute. It just assumes you want to run at 24 hours. So no more trying to make sure that there's a minute when it doesn't run. In this case, it's obviously a background audio sequence. I want my main show to kick in and override it, so I'm going to set the priority of this really, really low. And so this is going to kick off at basically 12 a.m. on the 1st of December, and it will start playing my background music track, and then my Christmas schedule, which has got a higher priority, will kick in at 7 p.m. The music, song, whatever song is playing here will suddenly stop, and this will take over. And then when this show finishes, the weekend show finishes, because it's the first one, at 11 p.m., the song that was suspended when the show kicked in will actually continue to play. So it actually just suspends that sequence. So that's what it's all about. So all very easy to set up, no harder, I think, than xSlights was to set up a schedule, possibly a little bit easier. So while I'm at it, some other things. Up here, you do actually have some volume controls. You can set the volume. Clicking on the volume there is actually a mute button, and it's smart enough to know what the volume was, so it only turns it back up to the actual show volume. So you do have volume controls here. At any time, you can come in and press play selected and it will play the sequence, or to be honest, it will actually, if you click over here and click play selected, I think it'll actually play that song. No, sorry, it played the schedule. There is a way to set a button up to play a particular song, and when you play a particular song, etc., it will actually interrupt whatever's scheduled at that point, play the song, and then when the song ends, it will resume the schedule. So if you've got a favorite song, let's set that up. So let's say Wizards in Winter is my best sequence. It's not, but let's imagine it was. And let's imagine I wanted to have a button so that I could play that sequence on demand. So now we get into our options. And all of the buttons that you see down here are all customizable. And that's down here, where you can decide to create buttons to do a whole bunch of things. So how do you know what all of the options are? Well, let's add something. So I'm going to add a button called Play Wizards, because that's really, really important to me. And then there's all of these possible commands that you can do. And in this case, I want to play okay. Okay, so I want to play a specified playlist step once only. Okay, now you need some parameters. Now the big challenge here is I don't actually give you any hints as to what the parameters are. Unfortunately, the only place at the moment where that is documented is in a document in the xSlights repository. So I do need to do something about that, and I'll probably try and write some tooltips or something to remind you what the parameters are. But there is a document here under API documentation that will tell me that. Sorry. Play specified playlist. A few of these. Let's just quickly find the one. There it is. So I have to specify the playlist name and the step name. Okay, so the playlist happens to be Christmas, and the playlist step name was Wizards of Winter. Wizards in Winter. Okay, let's go back into that. This could be easier. Wizards in Winter. Yep. Okay, so now you see I've got this button down here called Play Wizards, and if I click on it, it plays the song. All right, and it will play that song only, and when it finishes, it will resume whatever was doing. So if my sequence was playing, it will interrupt my sequence, play that song, because I want to show all my fans my best song, and then it will resume my sequence from where it left off. And so you can add as many of these as you like. It'll just keep on expanding and adding you more buttons down here. There are a whole bunch of commands that you can add here, including some pretty cool ones. So if you want to mute your show, there is one here. Adjust volume by or set volume to. So if I want to set it to 0, that button will mute my show. And then I can add another button if I want called unmute, which can set my volume back to 100% and so forth. So when the teenage hoons turn up in their car with their stereos going, I can have a mute button, which I can just click to mute it. Now, obviously, I have a mute button up here, but as you'll see in a minute, these buttons actually will appear on the web interface as well, so I can control these things from my phone. All right, don't forget to save. All that stuff doesn't get saved unless you do save it. Okay, so that's how you would set all of that up. Let's show you the web interface. So there's a couple of ways to get to the web interface. One is there is actually the tools here, and you can click on that and it will bring up the web interface where you can see your various sequences, etc. You can play them or you can go and view them, etc. There is also under the plugins here the buttons, and if you go to the buttons you will see that the buttons here are exactly the buttons that we created. So there's our play wizards, there's our mute button, there's our unmute button. These all look very large, etc., but if you were on a phone these buttons would be nice and big and easy to press on your phone. So you've got that that web control that I know a lot of people like on their Falcons, and their ability to control their shows easily. And you can also fully control, play a sequence, play a particular song, etc. So you could also jump into here and view it, find a song and say, actually, I want to play that particular song, and off it will start playing.
We're done, good job. Hey.
So you've got full control through the web interface of all the playing. The only things you can't do through the web interface is you obviously can't set your sequences up, etc. That's all done here using the xSchedule client. And obviously the xSchedule client has to be running on your PC. To get to your web interface, you would obviously type in the IP address of your computer that's running xSchedule. For those that desperately want to access the Easter egg, there's a bit of setup involved, and there's videos on that. But if you want to get to Tetris, you can get to that by clicking on the xScheduler version down here, and the Tetris will kick off and display on your tree or your matrix, however you've configured it all up to work. For those that want to do that, I'm still waiting for the first videos of someone who puts up their tree and plays Tetris on it. All right, so the only other thing that I probably should cover as part of the basic configuration is the modes here. So by default, you would normally be in standalone mode. Under this mode, basically, the xScheduler is running in standalone, so it's sending out all that data to all of those controllers. It's running your video, etc., on your show. Everything's working fine. If you want it to act as a Falcon Pi Player Master, you put it into master mode. In master mode, what will happen is the scheduler will send out exactly the same sort of synchronization packets that the Falcon Pi Player would send out. You do need to configure your Falcon Pi players into remote mode and load up all of the sequences. And we will then broadcast out those synchronization packets, and obviously your Falcon Pi players will act as if it had a Falcon Master, but in this case, obviously, it would be xSchedule. And the same should be true of the new firmware on the Falcon V3s, which will have the ability to act as FPP remotes. And so xSchedule will be able to send out those synchronization packets there as well. In that particular configuration in xLights, you would actually configure those channels typically in a large null block, because obviously you don't want the scheduler to be sending all of that data out. It's either that, or what you would do is you configure it all in xLights and then you deactivate them to stop the scheduler from sending those packets to those controllers. In remote mode, what will happen is the scheduler will actually just sit here quite happily listening and waiting for your Falcon Pi player in master mode to start broadcasting out the synchronization packets. And when it gets told that a song is playing, the scheduler will go through all of its schedules, try to find the matching song, and it will then play that song and do whatever it is that you've set up under that song. So if you've told it to play some video, it will obviously play video on your screen. If you've told it that it's to send out some data to some particular, I don't know, a USB attached device, etc., it will do that as well. So yeah, so it totally integrates in with the Falcon Pi player master and remote synchronization. So I think that's the basics. There's a whole bunch of other capabilities here. All of those things that we saw here, including things like changing the volume, are all schedulable. So you could, in theory, create a schedule that kicks in at 9 p.m. and takes your show and reduces the volume by 50%. All of those things are now possible. Generally speaking, they don't require you to write plugins or whatever else. Most of those things are built in, although all the capabilities, if someone wanted to write plugins or extend the scheduler, everything that you see on this interface, other than the actual configuration itself, is all controllable by a remote program. And so there's pretty much an unlimited sort of set of things that you could achieve. It's just a question of what you want to achieve. So I'm happy to pause there, take questions, go into detail in some of the advanced features, but like I said at the beginning, that's more an on-demand thing than me sort of droning on for the next hour or so. So open to questions. Did I miss anything in chat?
Not really. There's just one question about P10 panels that I didn't answer yet.
Okay, well, means I got to go find it. How do I find chat? Okay, well, that was fun. Oh, there it is. Zoom chat is very slow. If running P10 panels, would I need to use FPP master mode and have one FPP send the E131 data to my lights and one for my P10 matrix? So look, it really depends on the size of your P10 panels. If you're running a reasonably small set of P10 panels, you can absolutely send the data from either the Falcon Pi player or from the scheduler, it's fine. Once your P10 panels start to get large, obviously the amount of data being sent around the network is pretty extreme, and you're probably not going to want to do that. You're probably going to want to place that data onto a BeagleBone or a Pi, put the thing into remote mode, and have your scheduler, whether it's the Falcon Pi player or in this case the xSchedule, act in that master mode and send out the synchronization packets so that all that data is not being sent over the network. Because it does get very big very quickly. One of the beauties of the scheduler over the Falcon Pi player, there's a couple of things. So one, the network cards in your average computer are substantially faster than the network cards in the Falcon Pi player. The Falcon Pi player actually, my experience is limited to somewhere between 1 and 200 universes. Once you get beyond that, the network bottleneck on the Falcon Pi player starts to become a problem. At least up to the Model C, the Pi 3 boards that are out these days. The other problem with the Falcon Pi player, which is actually, I think, a Linux problem, is if you're doing unicast to a controller and that controller happens to be not present on your network, the Falcon Pi player has an issue where it starts to slow down dramatically. You'll always, as we get closer to Christmas, see people saying, I don't understand why my Falcon Pi player is playing so slowly. All the lights seem to be out of sync. And the reason for that is that when you try to send a network packet unicast to a device using the Falcon Pi player and the device is not turned on, then Linux gets caught in not trying to find the device and it slows everything down. I have not seen that problem on the PC, either in xLights or in the scheduler, so it's not as sensitive to that. Can I explain the first last song setup? Does it play it once in your playlist? Yeah, so basically if so this sequence here, if I come up here and if I click first step once only, that means my THX sequence, which is the opening, the studio that has that sort of, I can't remember what it's called. So if I set first step once only, that means when my show starts at 7 p.m, this sequence will play, and after that point, that thing will never play again. It will only play the rest of the songs in a loop. If I set last step once only, that means that this roasted turkey, Wish You a Merry Christmas, will only play once, and it will only play after 10 p.m. So what will happen is when 10 p.m. hits, whichever song happens to be playing will finish, and then it will jump to this song here and it will play this song, and then it will turn the show off. So if you've got some restrictions on how long your show can run, you'll need to take into account the fact that if you set this to last step once only, that this will run to completion and it won't start until after you've told your show to end. And that's true generally. Generally speaking, when your sequence ends, it always ends the last song gracefully rather than just doing a hard turn off of your lights at that particular point in time. So that's how the first step once only and last step once only works.
The last thing you said was that it does not interrupt. Is that also true for the Christmas music you're playing in the background? It's going to finish a song before it starts the 7 o'clock show.
No, the 7 o'clock show will start promptly at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
When a sequence is scheduled over another sequence, you've set its higher priority, it will start immediately. The other thing is when I click this Play Wizards button, so if my Christmas sequence is happily playing along and I click this Play Wizards button, it's actually going to suspend my current song right where it is. It's going to play Wizards because I said Play Wizards. Now there are other controls that say play this song. So if you go back in to the options here and we go back into our buttons, some of these things here talk about gracefully. So there's things like end gracefully. At the end of the current step. So play the specified playlist at the end of the current step. So if you were to create a button which was based on this, so to say I want to play this particular playlist, so you could put Wizards into its own playlist, and this says, that's stop the specified playlist at the end of the current step. So if you created a button like that and pressed the stop button, what it would do is it would play the rest of the song, and at the end of the song, it would stop it. This one here would stop the playlist at the end of the current loop. So it would go through till it got to the end of the loop, and then it would stop the playlist gracefully at that point. This one stops it at the end of the current step, and so forth. So there's a few of those. Jump to play once at end of the current step. I don't know what the rest of that says. So that one basically says, so if you set up a button that has this particular command, it'll finish the current step, it'll jump to the last step that you asked for, and it will play that. So there's a few things like that in here. Oh yeah, so this one here, jump to the specified step in the current playlist at the end of the current step. So what that will do is it will finish the song that's currently playing, and then it will play the song that that I've asked for. So if I wanted to do wizards in winter, oh. So that button there will, if I clicked on that button, and it's disabled at the moment because the playlist is not playing, if I clicked on that button, what it would do is it would finish whatever song it was currently playing within that playlist, and then it would play Wizards at the end of that step. So that's how you could sort of insert the song without making the show suddenly interrupt and go and play the song. So to be honest, if people have other needs, if there are things that you can't do in there, I'm more than happy to add additional ones. They're really quite trivial to add. It really comes down to what people need. Is there a way when the current playlist hard stops to start a higher priority playlist instead of having the lower priority playlist hard? To stop. Fade out audio and lights. I'm not sure, Ryan. Maybe if you want to ping me an email, etc., and describe exactly what you want to do, and I can see whether there's a way to do it.
Jeff had a question about the web page. The web page is a web server that's running on your show network, so you can access that with any device that is on your show network.
That's right. So it's not inherently internet accessible. If you wanted it to be internet accessible, that's possible, but you would need to do port forwarding on your router to your show computer in order to make that possible. I do not warrant in any way the hardness of the web server on the scheduler. It's built on a very small web library that I incorporated. There's not a hell of a lot of functionality in there. That means the attack surface is quite small, but at the same time, like any piece of software, bugs can exist. If you expose it to the internet, you do so at your own risk.
Which the same thing goes with FPP. So.
Well, that's right. Exactly the same thing does go with FPP. FPP is not necessarily designed to sit on the internet either.
There was a question. Can you make an announcement that says this is the last song of the night before the song plays?
Can you? So look, technically you could. How would you do that? You'd need to go. So what we'll need to do is we'll come up here and we'll add an advanced playlist, because in order to do that, we're going to have to get into advanced mode. Give it a random name. Let's add a bunch of FSCQs. It doesn't really matter which ones. It's all good. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the last step play only once, but we're going to want to do something special. So let's imagine you did have an announcement. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to open this in advanced mode. And you'll see in advanced mode, the tree looks slightly different. You've got this extra layer. And the reason for the extra layer is that these are actually playlist items and you can actually have multiple of them. So what we're going to do here, we're going to right click on here and we're going to add an audio file. And we're going to go and choose an audio file, which let's imagine this is my announcement. Okay, so there's my announcement that I want to have happen. This one happens to be 48.241 seconds long. So I am going to delay this by 49 seconds. Okay. So in theory, what's going to happen now is this is going to play immediately. And then 49 seconds later, this is going to kick in, which happens to fit nicely just after this audio track, and then it will play for 30 seconds. and I believe that will give you the behavior that you're after. So we click OK, click Save.
Keith, go back to that really quick.
Mm-hmm.
The timing doesn't add up correctly there. It says that step is 48 seconds long. But
Yeah, it doesn't, but it's now fixed up here. This now says it's 79 seconds long, which is the 30 seconds plus the 49 seconds that I've delayed it. But you're right, that doesn't say that it's 79 seconds long. This is something that I don't know that I've tested extensively. So if you're planning on doing this, I would get this set up in the next few days, test it out. If you have a problem, let me know and I will get it to work. But technically, this is how you're meant to be able to do it. So this one step has got 2 playlist items. It's got my audio track that's going to play. It's going to play immediately when that step starts. And then it's going to delay this step for 49 seconds. And then it will obviously play the FSCQ file. So hopefully that's the sort of thing that you were looking for. And because it all sits within this one step, and this one step is set as a last step once only, this thing should play just the once at the end, and you'll get both your audio track and your sequence playing.
You might want to go over like what is a step based versus a song.
So obviously when we were in here earlier, it just looks simple, and that's what simple mode is. So in a simple mode, each step only contains one item, and in this case, these are all playing FSCQ files or playing audio files, etc. When you're in advanced mode, which is what we were in here, it separates it out, and a step is something that plays, so it can contain multiple items. It doesn't have to be just the song that's playing. In this case, this step here, you can add a whole bunch of other things in here. So you can add things like this one here. So here, what I'm going to do is I've got a RDS, an interface, a program that interfaces with my FM broadcaster, and my FM broadcaster wants to send out the name of the song that's playing. And I do that by writing the name of the song that's playing into a file called music.txt. And if I come here, you'll see that it gives me a whole bunch of things that I can put in here. And I want to say this running playlist step. So we're going to go %running _ playlist step %. And what it will do is when this step runs, so when this song runs, it's going to not only play the sequence, but at the same time, it's going to go and write to this file called music.txt, and it's going to write the name of the current step that's playing, which will be this 30-second animation 4, which obviously then my unit that talks to maybe over a serial connection to my FM player will put the name of the song out onto the FM radio, right? So this is the concept of having multiple things happen at once. The thing to remember is that steps occur sequentially or randomly as appropriate, and the multiple items that you've got configured underneath the steps, these things all run at once unless you tell them to delay, and that can create this elongation of the schedule if that's what you want. And there's a whole bunch of these, right? So PJ links for controlling projectors if your projector happens to set it. Adding an image lets you display an image on a projector. You can also technically play multiple audio files at once, and the scheduler will quite happily mix those audios together and play 2 songs at once. If you've got an ESCQ file, which is like the background type sequences that FPP supports, so if you've got an ESCQ to play on a particular element in your show, that's also possible. One of the ones I love, one of the ones I will be doing in my show, sorry, hang on, not that. I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to add a advanced playlist. I'm going to call it test. And up here, I'm going to add a test step. Okay, and what this lets you do is, if I put it in ABC, this is basically going to do red, green, blue on my show. And I can say how many channels I want to test on. So I don't know, let's say I had 60,000 channels. Oh, well, there you go. You can't do any more than 5,454,688. Might have to fix that one.
Assigned, like the amount in your setup tab?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, yes, that could be it. That could be how many channels are in my show. So it maxed it out at the number of channels in my show. This is gonna display the red, green, and blue for a ½ second each, and it's going to loop around for a minute. So I can increase that. I can run this for, well, I can do that. That's fine. And then what I can do is I can come in here and schedule this, and my show starts at 7 o'clock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start that at 18:30 until 7 o'clock. I definitely want to loop it around. I'm just going to play it all the time, every year, all the time. So that's going to kick off pretty much tonight at 8:30. And what that will do is it will basically run a test sequence on my show a ½ hour before my show starts. So I can go out and check that all of my controllers have come up correctly, all my lights appear to be working correctly, and then at 7 o'clock my show can kick in. And so I would always do that every night. I go out, about an hour before my show starts, all my controllers fire up, etc. And I go out and I check that everything's working correctly. And so now I can schedule that test sequence to run at that time of night. And as I said, there's a whole bunch of different types of test patterns there that you can support. Node, I should say none. Oh, maybe not. Alternate, so this will just do value 1 or value 2. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of those things in there. What else have we got?
Not too many questions. You must have covered it pretty well.
Yeah, I haven't even touched on some of the things like output processing, which is an incredibly powerful feature. So output processing will let you do things like set up dimming on particular elements, or particular blocks of channels. If you wanted to dim your entire show, you could set up an output process that would just go through and dim everything before writing it out. You can also do things. I have this thing called dim white, which basically will go through and it will look at your show, and only when you're setting your pixels to white will it dim them. So if you've got power issues when all white is on, but it's all good when it's red, green, or blue or whatever, you can set this add dim white, and it will only dim the pixels when they happen to be set to white.
So you basically just created a compressor.
Yeah, so you can also do color reordering. So if you've got an old school controller that doesn't support color reordering, and you replace a pixel and that pixel happens to have a slightly different color order, and so you just want to reorder that one particular pixel, you can do that here in the scheduler. As it plays, it will just reverse that change the color order on that pixel or that range of pixels, even when your controller doesn't support it. You can also do remapping. So if you've got a dead LOR port, and so you move something onto a different port, you can do remapping here without having to go back and re-render and re-save all of your sequence files. You can just remap something from one channel to another on the fly. So there's a bunch of this sort of output processing, and because of the extra grunt that the PC has that the Pi doesn't, I can be much more adventurous in terms of pre-processing stuff while the show's running, because to be honest, there's CPU cycles to burn. This thing does not break out a sweat when it's running your show. There is a check schedule. Just like there is a check sequence, it will go through and it will It will come through and give you any warnings. So here I've got 2 schedules with the same priority, and it's warning me that, hey, if those 2 things happen to clash, then, I'm not certain what one's going to choose. I have a playlist which is referring to a video that doesn't happen to exist. And so it will give me warnings like that. This is probably not as elaborate as the check sequence in xLights, but it does have a whole bunch of checks for common type errors that can develop over time in your sequence. So if one of your files goes missing or something, it will flag it. So no other questions. Everyone's just going to use it in basic mode. All right, so don't forget what I said at the beginning. Test this out early. Don't leave it to the last minute to set your schedule up. Get it set up, run it for a few days. You don't even have to have your lights connected. Just run it, make sure that it kicks off at the right times and so forth. There is a log file that gets produced, which has detailed records of every decision that it's made about when things are going to be played and so forth. If you have problems, please send the log file to me, because it will let me see what the scheduler was actually thinking, why it decided to start something or stop something, and so forth. And that will help us get to the bottom of any problems that you might have. We didn't talk about background playlists. Background playlist is if you've got something like a tune to sign and you just want it to play all the time, you can set that up as a background playlist, and that will just quite happily in the background always play. You don't have to schedule it or anything. It will just sit there and play in the background. Just saves you the trouble of including that in every single sequence, things like that.
John has a good question. Can you send an email when the show starts?
Can you send an email when the show starts? So technically, so the scheduler does not have anything that will go in and do that. However, oops, didn't want to do that. So if I go in and take this playlist here, we'll go put it into advanced mode, because obviously we're going to want to do something special now. What we'll do is we're going to add a process. So what we've done is we've added a step with a thing called run process. And what this lets you do is run pretty much any program on your system. So if you have a program on your system that will send an email, if you have a command line that you can send that will send an email, you can do it here. You can kick that off at that point and send an email. There's nothing inbuilt that will do it. There are a couple of things. There is another one here called curl. So this will issue a web request. So you can do a request to a website, a GET, or even a post to a website. So you put in the URL and you can put in a body. So that may be possible, but there's not an SMTP. Could I set up an SMTP? I guess I could if that was something that you really desperately wanted. Again, ping me, tell me what you want. I'd be happy to add an SMTP connector that would kick off and send an email or something. Since we have time, can we cover inserting the song title to a matrix? Okay, all right. So so you can absolutely put text on a matrix. And the way you would do that is, first of all, you need to define your matrix. So you will need to come up here to matrices, and you will need to describe your matrix so that xLights knows how to render to it. So you get your matrix. Okay, so first thing you need to do is you need to describe what your matrix looks like. So I actually do have a matrix. That's not my matrix. I was looking at those channels layouts earlier and wondering why they look so strange, and the reason is because it's not my show. My lights, home, select. No. Okay, so here's my show. Here's my matrix. Okay, so this one is 3 strings. So I have to say it's 3 strings. Each string is 288 long. Strands per string is 6. The start channel, so the start channel here is 2723. There's no universal start channel. And it starts in the bottom left, which is okay, and it happens to be a horizontal matrix. So I've described my matrix so that the scheduler knows exactly where my matrix data lives, etc. Okay, so having done that, I can now come into my sequence, and we're going to do an advanced edit. We'll just pick this step here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a text item into this particular sequence. And I don't know, we want to put the song name on. Now, in this case here, there's no way to put it. So what we would do here is we could just type in Wizards in winter. We could choose the font. We also here get to choose the color, and it will actually obey that color. We can decide which way we want the text to be displayed, whether we want it to move, so we want it to come from the right-hand side to the left-hand side, how fast we want to do. You also get to decide how the text will interact with your show, right? So, you know, we can average it, we can overwrite it, which will basically blank out whatever else the show was trying to play on the matrix, or you can play with one of the masking options, etc., which will blend it in with whatever happens to be playing in your show at that point in time, and it will either mask it out or overlay it black so that you get black text on top of whatever happens to be on your matrix at that point in time. You'll also here need to go in, however, and set the duration. So in this case, I'm going to want it to be at least 186 seconds so that it runs for as long as the song. Otherwise, by default, it's 1 frame. So the text will flash up for a frame and disappear, and you'll go, what the hell happened? So that's how I would, on that particular step, put text up on a matrix on my song. Eric, I think SMTP for errors when it starts. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's how that would work. It could definitely send you an email to say, hey, it started or hey, it stopped. I'm not sure it could send an error. An error is an error. Any other questions? Is there a delay for text? Oh, so do you want to, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Okay, so if I don't know, like a lot of subtitles, oh, no, there's not, but I could add it. If you really wanted this to have a delay, so the text didn't display for 10 seconds in, I could add that if that's what you wanted. Again, let me know, send me an email, raise a crest or whatever, and I'm happy to consider that. There's no reason why I didn't add it. I just, for whatever reason, didn't occur to me. Could the same be done for a megatree? Absolutely. So a megatree is no different. To be honest, a megatree is a matrix. So what we can do is we can come in here and we can add my arch tree. So let's go back to my show. Here's my arch tree. It's a flat tree. It's 8 strings. Each string is 300 long. 2 strands per string. Doesn't sound right. I'm sure there's actually only 4 strings and 4 strands per string. And my start channel. So what's my start channel on my tree? It's 10,673. It starts in the bottom left. It happens to be vertical. There's my tree. So now if I want to put that text on it, here, I would come in, I would choose my arch tree now is where I want to display the text. Obviously it's a vertical thing, so orientation normal probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So I might want to do it vertical up so that it scrolls up my tree. Done. That's so easy. Can you save the scheduler setup playlists and move from one machine to another? So yes, you can. The scheduler itself is my show. Here's my show folder. And so there is the scheduler file itself. It's just called xlights.xschedule. It sits in my show folder. Just like with any other thing, if you keep everything inside your show folder, and I've spoken at length in other videos about how important it is that you generally do that, then if you grab that show folder, move it onto another computer, it should be smart enough to go and find everything. Just the same way that xLights is quite happy for you to move things from one computer to another and let you move things from drive to drive, and it somehow magically finds everything. No. So Steve asks, can you use the universe and start channel instead of absolute? And the answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is because in order to do universe and start channel, well, in order to use some of the more advanced modes, to be honest, actually, could I do it? It's not done that way at the moment. Could I do it? Probably I could. But I would not be able to do it for all things. So I wouldn't be able to do things like model chaining. But I could definitely consider, once again, raise a request if you want me to. I could do universe and start channel. The scheduler actually has all the information necessary to do that. So that's a good idea. Thanks, Steve. But yeah, raise it. I'm not going to remember this, and I probably won't watch the video again, so send me a reminder. Last call for questions. All right. Remember again, set it up early. Don't wait until the 30th of October to test your Halloween sequence is all going to work okay. Don't wait until the 1st of December to check that your schedule is going to work okay for Christmas. If there are bugs, like I said, I will endeavor to address them as quickly as I can. As ever, the ability to reproduce the problem will definitely help me get things fixed quickly. I'm keen not for people to have their shows work and work first time. So thank you guys. I'm going to stop the recording, and I'll hang around for a little while if anyone's got any other things that they want to ask for, not necessarily scheduler related.